G'day Toy Fiends, this is Factor here from Irikanji Toys. I'm here for another tutorial thing on how I create all of my toys in the hopes that I can show you a couple of my techniques. So I want to go into the next phase of things, which is sanding. And you'll notice the video title is totally different. So I was going to go through and sand this. However, I have a weekend coming up and I'm really far behind on doing a lot of stuff. You notice I said stuff there. If I don't swear in the first 30 seconds of a YouTube video, I'm cool. So I'm just going to wait a little bit. So what I wanted to actually go through now was how I set up my molds. I have about 5 pieces now that I've finished and sanded, and they're all ready to be molded. And they've kind of, caught up with me a little bit. So I want to go through and just explain my methodology for making molds and putting molds together. You've probably seen videos like this 100 times before if you're interested in making your own toys. Mine might be a little different. It might be the same. Everybody has a very different technique when it comes to making molds. There is no right or wrong way, as per usual. Standard disclaimer. So let me show you first some of the tools that I'm going to use when I'm making my own molds. So the first thing that I have is a little stabby stab. Right? Just this little tiny stabby stab thing. This is a dental tool. It's useful for doing something with to teeth. But what I use it for is for tracing. You'll see what I mean in a minute. I have my silicone sticks because they're very good for setting up molds. And I have my little digger thing here, which I like to use. Now the other thing that I have is a Lego plate. Why? Because some people use cardboard and stuff to set up their molds, but I use Lego. I use Lego because, well, it's reusable. And as you can see, I have used this a lot, right? I can build any shape out of this that I want. Okay, so sure, there's bits of silicone in here. You can save this, right? Save your leftover silicone, put it in a bag, because you can chop it up and use it for filler in a silicone mold, which maybe I'll show you when I actually come to molding. So I use Lego, man. It's really easy to use. I like it. And I have a whole bunch of different shapes and stuff like that, right? So I have a whole bunch of different pieces. I have this guy, I have this guy, I have these little dudes here that I want to mold, and then I have this that I want to mold and all its pieces. So what am I going to do first? I'll just do some standard 2-piece molds first, and then maybe I'll get into these ones a bit later, maybe in the next tutorial, and show you how I do my 3-piece molds, because this one here is going to need 3 pieces, right? So first I just kind of take a look at my setup here. I've got this guy here. I've got some old plasticine here that I forgot to eat. No, I'm not going to eat that. And I just kind of look at, where they're going to lay out on my Lego bit. Okay, there's a lot of shit on this Lego plate. There's even resin. I don't know why there's resin on it. That was a dumbass move. You take a look at the proportions of these things, okay? This here, if it's 2-piece mold, it's going to be, it's going to be a bigger mold than this piece. It's going to be out to probably about there, right? Which is a fairly hefty chunk of silicone. Maybe once it's finished, maybe about 500 grams of silicone. 500, 600 grams even maybe. And this one here will probably be to about here. So this one will probably be around 400 to 500 grams of silicone. We'll see how my brain estimates go with this, because I might be completely wrong. So I'm just taking a look here, and I will set up my Lego. It's really this simple. Well, nothing's ever simple, but so let's have a look here. Maybe an 8 and a 6. So I'm going to set up 2 molds in the same row. because I find it's just more efficient to do it this way. If I have two pieces, I probably won't cast the silicone at the same time. The silicone that I have sets really quickly, so I wouldn't want to risk actually pouring two pieces at the same time. That might be a bad idea if I put it on the odd there. There's that resin, so let's not do that. I really should have cleaned this board off before I started using it and before I started doing a demonstration, but I didn't think about that. So let's just dig this shit off here. Jeez, Fletch. Preparation. It's all about preparation. This is what I was saying. I do things on the fly, man. Like, ooh, camera wiggle. I do things on the fly, so preparation is not key for me. Okay, so I'm just kind of look at him here. I want a bit of space around here because, yeah, I'm just thinking about gates. And gates are a really useful thing. They help you pull all of your air out. And for those of you that don't have any pressure casters and stuff like that, you can create stuff that does not have bubbles. Unless you're doing clear, which isn't, you know, absolute necessity. Well, not a necessity. You don't absolutely need it, a pressure caster for clear, but if you want that crystal clear kind of look, then you're going to. I feel like that's a bit too tight in here. So, you know, the wider you go, the more silicone you're going to use. But I'm going to make it a little bit wider just to give it some room in case there's any weird bits in here that I want to gate out. Now, you'll see this will be the top of the mold here. And I'll pour in from this way and it'll come down here. So there's areas in this that are going to have to be gated. So this here, there's going to have to be a gate on these two hands, otherwise the air will get trapped up in here. Okay, so I've just zoomed in a little bit. These shitty cams. So I think that that's going to be okay, but it's too close in there. So you can get a bunch of 4s and maybe just bring this in up to a 2 there. So as you can see now, you can see that this is actually going to be a pretty substantial, well, see, this is the thing with Lego, right? So now if I do that, I'm wasting box, and I don't have that many 3s, but I have a couple. So I'm just going to go ahead now and set some of these up and build them up, and then I'll show you the next stage. Okay, so you can see I've got the layout. This one was pretty simple. It's a little tight, but this one, man, you know, I'm trying to play it safe here, but this is going to be a substantially large mold. This is going to take probably about 700 grams of silicone to do a 2-piece mold. It's not efficient. It's probably not as efficient as other people would do it, but this is the way that I do it. The good thing about this is that this mold will not be very tall because it's a very thin kind of piece, right? So the mold's probably only going to be about that thick on it, right? So I'll probably, maybe 600. So I've just laid these out here like this, and the pieces are set. Not too happy with this one. Maybe cardboard would have been a good idea. Who knows? Maybe. I just don't want to kill so many trees, man. So I'm going to build this up now, and then I'll get ready for the plasticine. Okay, so you can see here that I've built this up into the boxes for the molds, but I kind of made a mistake here. This is really high, But what I really want to do is I want to be able to get into the plasticine once I put it in there. So I'm just going to pull all this shit off here. I probably want it at about that level. Right about there. Otherwise it's going to make it really difficult for me to get down and block the plasticine in and stuff like that. This should be okay here, I think. Yep. And this should be okay here. Right. So I'm going to take these out. And I'm going to pull out my trusty plasticine. Some people use clay and stuff. I just use plasticine. Oh, this stuff's really hard. Ugh. Yeah, you've been in there for a while, haven't you? Yeah. It's probably been a good 2 or 3 months since I've molded anything. As you can see, the old mold pieces are there. Let's just reuse that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take this. I'm just going to... You don't need to be exact with this shit at this point in time. Oh, there's the shits again. Alright, you just want to get it in there for the moment and lay it out. We'll fix this up later. So just throw your chunks. It doesn't matter if the plasticines are old or anything like that. Oh, it does get hard though. A bit of force. Alright, so I'm just going to spend some time and I'm going to get the plasticine in and then I'll take you through the next step. Alright, so I'm just going to do this for a while and get the plasticine in and nice and level, and then I will show you the next part of the process. Okay, so I've put the plasticine in and you're all like, hey Factor, it's really rough and shit, man, like, yeah, what you can do about that? And admittedly, the plasticine can be hard to smooth out, but here's the trick, right? Plasticine hates water, which means that I love water. So I just dab a little water in here, dab it on my plasticine, and it smooths it out really easily. Just a little bit of water on your plasticine, because the plasticine is oil based. It just reduces the friction of your finger and it just smooths out really well. It's pretty cold here today, so the plasticine is very, 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 very hard, but the water will smooth it out really quickly, really easily. Notice I'm trying to get the plasticine right up into the corners here. Okay, because the last thing that you want is for your silicone to be running down the holes and the gaps in the sides of these and just wasting silicone. And I don't know where you live and what it's like where you are, but here in Australia, silicone's fucking expensive, man. We don't have smooth on and shit. We got a place called Barnes. They've got good quality stuff, but they're expensive, man. Like, thankfully they have a couple of deals on at the moment, but overall their prices are rather expensive. I would usually go to a place called Solid Solutions here in Melbourne, and they have a silicone which is a 500, and it's really great, but their catalyst is a very long acting silicone catalyst. Takes overnight to set. They do have a fast catalyst, but every time I've used it, I don't know what it is. It's really fast, and I just don't have enough time to get my silicone in before it starts to set, and I've had problems with it. I've been able to do it before. The good thing about using a longer duration silicone is that if you're not vacuuming and degassing your silicone, it gives more time for the air to rise out of it. Right? So I think I've got this one really nice and smooth. See how nice and smooth that is now? Like, just a bit of water. You don't want this water on here when you're casting your silicone. You don't want water on here, but it'll evaporate by that time. It'll go. And if it doesn't, you can just get, yes, correct, a paper towel. You can get a paper towel and just wipe it off. I'm just pushing it up in here. I'll come and clean these corners off because I like nice clean mold lines in a minute. So now I'll just go through and do this one. So you can see I don't care about the fucking plasticine. The plasticine is just a vessel. It's been used, like this plasticine I've had for, wow, maybe 3 or 4 years now. It has seen countless molds, and I have reused it over and over and over and over again. Oh, maybe I bought some extra. I think we bought some extra. Back when I was in the studio and I was working on some toys with Chipter from Good Guys Never Win, GGNW Toys. I think we bought some extra because we had a lot of molding jobs to do and we just didn't have enough plasticine. But there's a good combination of maybe 2-3 year old plasticine in here and some maybe 2 years, 1 year, 2 years. Okay, so this is all smoothing out now. Bit more water. And see, the water just lets my fingers slide right over this, man. It's a godsend. Like, I don't want to use a clay or anything like that. It's messy. The plasticine, I find, comes off of my masters so easily. And it's just reusable. I like to be able to reuse things. You know? It's nice to reuse things. Many things have many different purposes. So, it's not... Oh, it's alright. Now, you'll notice on my Lego walls... Probably can't see it from here. Maybe on this side if I move this out of the way a little bit. You'll notice on my Lego walls that I'm building here that they're interlocking. They're not brick, brick, brick. They're brick, shift, brick, shift, brick. They're on alternatings. That's so the silicone can't actually get out in between the sides of the Lego. Don't ever just lay them brick upon brick like this. Don't ever do this. Okay? Don't ever like just get your bricks and put them up on like that. Do it like that. That way the silicone has a much harder time getting out. If it's like that, your walls will be flimsy, you won't have much structural integrity. Bad shit will happen. Not bad shit, just, you know, you might break a mold. You might fuck something up. You might waste silicone. It's the cardinal rule, man. Don't waste silicone. It does not go a long way. Already I can tell that this here is going to be a big mold, man. Like a lot of silicone here. I can use filler and filler silicone and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to on these ones. I just want to show you the purest kind of way of doing this. Alright, it's mostly up in the edges. Don't worry about it too much. Like, a lot of this is going to get fucked up. Okay, I'll just take some of this. And you'll see why it's going to get fucked up and it won't remain smooth. Don't worry too much at this stage about getting it too flat or anything like that. Just get it kind of nice. So, this one, this dude was going to go here, right? Cool. Now, I don't want to press it in here, okay? I don't want to press it in because I'll break my master, right? Like, if I press it in, I'll probably fuck it up. So I take my pointy thing, right? And I just kind of go, yeah, he looks about good there. And I just roughly trace a line. This is what I meant by a tracer, right? Roughly trace a shape around with my pointy thing. It's there. These bits here are going to be a bit harder. And maybe I just won't worry about them and I'll come back and do them after. Let's just do between the legs here. A little bit here, up on the arm here. Just trace it out here. Cool. A bit of hay fever today. Woo. Yeah, okay, cool. That's that done. Now I'll take this one here. Just make sure there's no water on there. Okay. This one's tight, man. Like, see, I want a gate coming up from here. So I'm going to have to be a bit careful about this. And I'll just kind of trace this line here. Doesn't have to be exact, man. Because you're going to fix it up after. Like, This is all preliminary stuff. Some people might say, oh, it's a bit of a waste of time factor, but this is just how I do it. I like to take my time. I don't mind rushing. Like, I don't mind taking my time with this stuff, right? The more time I take when I'm doing this stuff, the better the mold, the less cleanup I'm going to have to do when it comes to actually casting the resin. If you get a nice clean mold, then you don't have to do so much cleanup, man. Which saves you time in the end. Okay, cool. That's that. So, if you can see it, I've got a really rough outline of both the pieces in here. Okay. And now I'm going to dig it out with my digging tool, which I talked about before. So I'm just going to come around and I'm going to go, yeah. And I'm just going to cut this stuff out. So while I do that, and I'll do this, and then I'll come back and I'll show you through the next step. Okay, here we have two nice holes in this beautiful plasticine that we spent a lot of time smoothing out. No, we didn't. We spent like 2 or 3 minutes doing it. Digging out these holes took me maybe 5 to 8 minutes. Not very long at all. But I did go through and kind of look at them every so often to make sure these things fit in. They don't have to be clean. They don't have to be exact. Doesn't matter. You're going to be fixing all of that stuff. Like, I say this over and over, like, you don't have to be clean and tidy about stuff. You can fix all that stuff as you go along. Sure, if you want to save time later, I guess you can do that, but, you know. So I'm just looking at this here, and he kind of fits in there. Now I'm going to really gently push him down. Gently. Because I don't want too much plasticine sticking on the other side, otherwise it'll take me time to clean it up. But you can see, he kind of fits in there nicely. Right, some of these bits are up. But, you know, that's fine. Yep. We're going to build that up and fix that. That's totally cool. So we're going to look at this guy, and as I said, you know, the in between the arms bits and the legs, that's okay. Didn't work anyways. But we're going to have to build up the plasticine up to this level anyways, up here. So it doesn't matter that it's not exact, because we're going to have to build in the plasticine, like, so that it kind of curves up like that, right? So let's just put him in here and see if he will gently, because, you know, sometimes your masters are a little fragile. And I did have another tool. This was just a bigger version of the little digger thing that I had. I just don't think that this is quite enough. Quite enough for him. So I'm just going to adjust here. Okay. So let's have a look again. Spikes are going to get in the way, so let's just cut some of that out there. Cut some out there. And his head's just not quite tall enough because he's got those little antenna pieces. So I'll just cut some out there. Again, I'm just getting rid of shit. Doesn't matter. Okay, let's make sure he's a bit level here. And now let's just push him down a little bit gently. Gently, because I don't know how strong this master piece is. Okay. So now I've got my two pieces in. They're in the plasticine. Lots of holes and stuff around here. But then comes the next fun part. And you just build in your bits around it. So I've seen a lot of different ways of people doing this. Sometimes they put the piece in and they build the clay around it and all that. To me, it seems like it would take a bit of extra time doing it that way. I don't know. Maybe I should give it a go and make a mold that way and see how long that takes. But you still got to smooth stuff out. You still got to build things in. Like, still got to get it kind of exact. So I'm building this layer up here so that it reaches up to the tail. Because the tail's kind of in the middle of the piece, right? So hopefully I have enough room here for a gate to bring the air out, and there'll be gates on here, probably a gate going from here up to this piece here. So I'm just going to build the plasticine up around the edges here. And this will take a bit more time. I mean, this point and this part of the mold making process, this is where I take time to do it, okay? Because if you do this correctly, and if you spend a bit of extra time building the edges of your mold here, you can get such clean casts that won't have any flashing on them, all right? And what I mean by flashing is when you pour your resin in, you're going to get little bits of resin that come out the gaps. But if these edges are nice and clean and really, really nicely well done, you don't get a lot of flashing. A little tiny bit. And you don't have to go through and sand off the edges of your piece and all that kind of stuff. So I generally take a bit of time doing my edging. And that's what I call this. This is the build edging, right? The mold build edging. Sounds like a good word for it. I don't think I've ever actually called it anything before, but the edging for the mold build sounds relatively decent. There's a big hole there where I dug out too much, so I'm just going to kind of like I'm going to shove a bit down there just to give it some support, because if I press something down in there, it's you know. Now I'm trying not to get any plasticine on here, otherwise I'll have to come and clean it up later. It's not a hard thing to do, but just extra time. So now I'm just shoving the plasticine into these holes. I'll come back to all these little bits later and make sure that all gaps are filled, that everything's nice and flush with the piece, that it's centered and there's a nice center line right down the middle of it. But this generally takes a little bit of time. And this one I'll kind of come in here and I'll build up these edges up to his arms like this. Okay? Because his hands are out a bit forward, you know, like there. You got to build up the plasticine to come up and in, and then down in this little bit here. So this one's going to be a little trickier and going to take a bit more time to actually like build in the plasticine. So I'm just going to spend some time doing this, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to show you the next step once I've built all of the bits up. Okay, so I've just spent a bit of time building this up, as you can see. Okay, alright, I'm fucking lying. It's the next night, it's the weekend. I took some time off, and I just hung out here in the studio, drinking some wine, and doing the piece. So I just wanted to show you what I've actually done with this here. Okay, so I've built it all up. Let's start with this one, because it's quite a simple one. I've left some stuff unfinished here, just to illustrate to you. So I've smoothed all of this out, I've built it all around, and I put it in really flush with this. Now, I'm really, really anal with doing my edging and stuff here, okay? It's going to be hard to explain, but there is a way in which plasticine will come up, and maybe I can illustrate it with my fingers. It'll come up on the edge like this, right? Okay, it'll look like that. So your plasticine will be going up against the piece, and as you put the edge of the clay up, it'll be up on an angle like that. You don't fucking want that. You don't fucking want that at all, because that is how your flashing increases. Because what happens is these little tiny bits here, they're not very strong, and they tear off and stuff, and the flashing begins around these tear points on your mold. A lot of people will just, you know, put their clay in and stuff and all that, and after maybe 10 pieces, their flashing becomes more. They get little, like, bad edges and stuff on their mold points. If you want a really clean mold and you don't want to have to clean that shit up, make sure that your plasticine is like this along the edge of your piece, right? You don't want the plasticine pushed up on the edge like that. And it's really sometimes really not obvious at all that it's doing that. But what you want is you want your plasticine to be as level as you possibly can so that this bit of silicone won't break off and it won't increase the amount of stuff. If you can get your plasticine up against your piece close like that, your flashing, man, if you do it right, I've had pieces and I've had pretty much not even a seam line on it. Nothing to sand off, nothing to go around the edges. I've been able to pull a piece out of a mold and it's been absolutely totally clean, and all I've had to maybe do is fucking sand the base of it, right? So I spent a lot of time coming around the edges and stuff here, and this one is not finished. You can see there's bits in that here. I'll just kind of, you know, either with my finger in that and I'll push it up, but then I'll come in with a small tool like this and I'll kind of, it's gonna be hard to see, and I'll pull stuff off. Really careful not to scratch my master, but I'll get rid of that little edging, right? And then I'll kind of push it down a bit more. This is why, you know, doing all these and doing these edges and stuff is why it takes me a long time to set up, and why I actually kind of enjoy this process, because I know down the track I'm not going to have to actually be spending as much time sanding off all the edges and cleaning it all up. So this piece here, man, this is the problem, right? So if you put arms that are coming out in the front like this, the front of your piece, you're going to have to build up underneath. Now, I've had to do something that I didn't really want to do, and that is bury. So this side of this leg has an indentation piece like this. I've had to put that under the plasticine, which means that when it comes out of the mold, I'll have to kind of pop it out. I don't like that, because the more you pop things out, the more wear you get on your silicone. And that's also where flashing can occur, where you're pulling it out of a mold so much that the silicone kind of frays around these really delicate edges and stuff like that. But I've had to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come through, I'll probably clean this up a bit more. I'll get all the edging and stuff like really, really, really nice. And then I'll come back when I finish that and I'll start to gate it. Okay? And I'll put my gates in, and then I'll put my keys in, and then that'll be pretty much it done. So I'll come through, clean all the rest of this up, and I'll come back and I'll show you how I do my gates and stuff. Bear with me. This is a longer process than, you know, people just doing maybe a 3-minute video and stuff like that. I don't really give a shit. If you're watching this, you're interested in it, and I'm just going to go through the whole fucking thing, because nobody ever really fucking goes through the whole fucking thing. They just show you little snippets of it. I just want to show you the whole fucking process. So I'll be back and I'll show you the gating. Yeah, I could go on for hours and just get it really, really perfect, but I'm not going to today. So you'll notice that I haven't smoothed out these edges around here. You know what? People that spend their time going, yeah, let's make a really nice edge of them. It doesn't fucking matter. Nothing in here, in this area, unless you want a nice clean mold and for it to look all pretty and shit, it doesn't matter. This doesn't matter, this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter, this doesn't matter. Some stuff down here matters, because you don't want silicone running back in, so you might feel that. This doesn't matter. It's all bullshit. The only thing that fucking matters is this stuff around the edge here. So I'm going to put some gates in. Right? Now, you'll notice that when I'm designing toys, if I'm thinking about it, this is where I'm going to pour the resin in from. Resin's going to come in here, it's going to flow down to the very bottom, right? So whenever I'm designing toys, I'm constantly flipping them around, I'm moving them up and down, and I'm making sure that when they're upside down, there's nothing that's sticking up like this, right? So I've already noticed one problem and one area that I probably really fucked up on, and that's here. Okay, so when the silicone pours in, it's going to pour in down here, It's going to pour in, pour in. When it hits there, there is a chance that I'm going to get an air bubble on that. And that's just me not paying attention and putting something facing and sloping up that way. There's nothing I can actually do about that because I can't gate it unless I pop something through the silicone. And then I have to, whenever I cast it, it's going to be really hard. So chances are I'm going to have an air bubble in there. Might be able to mitigate it, but probably not. It's just bad design on my behalf and something I should have paid more attention to. All right, but you'll notice all these fins, they're pointing upwards. These fins are upwards, upwards. That's so that think about the air has places to run to when you're pouring in, right? It can run up the slopes, okay? Run up the slopes. I'm probably going to get an air bubble in here. I tried to, when I sculpted this, slant it down, okay? But it wasn't perfect. My whole point here, however, was I'm going to sculpt some teeth to go along here. But I wanted to do that afterwards. But there's a slight slope on here and under here where I'm hoping the air will run out. But I feel like I'm probably going to get an air bubble in there. So when I'm casting, I'm going to have to jiggle the mold a little bit. And I'll show you that when I'm doing my molding, how I actually reduce and get rid of those air bubbles. Maybe in here I might get some, but again, I can shift the mold up and down and get rid of those. Or I can use a pressure pot. I've traditionally never used a pressure pot before, so I've learned how to gate things really well to minimize any air bubbles. I still occasionally fuck up. On this one, you can see everything's coming down here. This is on an angle so that the air doesn't get trapped and it comes up. These are on angles. They're all angled that way. Down, down. So the air, it has flow throughs. You'll notice that this here has to be gated. There has to be a gate. And when I'm talking about gates, I'm talking about putting in little bits and pieces where the air can flow out of, right? So I just use wire, man. Like, it doesn't really matter what you use, just as long as there's something in there that won't get cast in the silicone. If the gate isn't big enough, you can always come back with a scalpel afterwards and you can cut out the gates. But usually I'll just do this. Now, hands are a bitch, man, because this little thumb, usually that's an air bubble right there and trapped and it won't. So I try to kind of like put a little gate in the middle of the fingers there so the air can run out. I can always sand this piece off and do it. So I put the gate in there and then I just kind of press it into the plasticine so that it's actually in place and I can pop it out later, right? So that will help the air bubble from that thumb, right, and come out. But I'm still probably going to get an air bubble here, right? So I am a big fan of doing just gates everywhere, right? I try to put them in points where I can clip a little bit and do that. So I'll just put this one here so the air can come out there, right? I don't care if it's not connected here and stuff because I'll come back once I've actually casted the silicone mold. I'll come back and cut these little bits out of the silicone. Really, really simple to do, right? So I'm going to put another gate. I think that's going to kind of fuck up with the Lego there because when I put the Lego down, gate's going to pop out. Dumb ass. Okay, so I'm just going to put that there and I'm going to maybe just twist this around a little bit here. Sure, why not? That'll be fine, right? Okay, so I'm going to put another gate in here and let's just put the Lego in first. And I'll put another gate in going from here down. Let's just make sure that that's touching both the thumb and the finger there. Cool, cool. So you're just basically giving the air a place to escape at the top of the mold, right? So that it can mitigate all of those air bubbles. I do a lot of gates, man. Like, if you don't have a pressure pot, which I have not traditionally had, I am using one now. My buddy at Irikanji Toys has lent me one, and I am going to test it out along with these tutorials for the very first time. So I like to put gates in between the legs because here air can get trapped, and it will. So I just kind of shape. The reason I use wire rather than something rigid is because I do a lot of build-ups on my molds and stuff, right? So I get to be able to, I can actually use it with the wire. I can kind of shape it to fit where I'm going to, and if I have build-ups on the mold. Especially and hugely really useful to have wire when you're doing 3-piece molds and you're doing gates around sections of the 3-piece mold so that you can do really complicated sculptings, which would not traditionally, you would think, would be possible with doing just a mold without a pressure pot or without having a rotocaster or something like that. You can actually do really complicated sculpts and still be able to cast them properly if you're using wire as gates that can form around edges and stuff like that. So I'm going to be really careful here with this one because I'm a bit worried about these here and air bubbles getting trapped up in here. So what I'm actually going to do is I like to put my gates at points where, you know, they're not going to be too obvious. So I'm going to put a gate from here to the spike here, right? It doesn't, I don't really care if that shit's there, right? Like, because I'm going to gate this point here, this spike, out anyways, because I have found that with spikes and things that are really sharp and stuff, sometimes it just misses off the tip, right? Like just the tip of it, it will get missed out. I don't know why. I mean, I could have probably just used one whole piece here. And if I just measure it out a bit and get rid of this here. So I can just kind of like lay down my wire and go, hey, you know, that might fit there. And then I can kind of shape it so that it does fit and form the gate. Bit more of a twist there. Yeah, it's not, it needs to be shorter than that. Gates don't need to be pretty. You don't really need to care about gates because it's just discarded resin. It's not going to take a hell of a lot out. Alright, and I just embed it in there. Right, so now that's gated there, and that point is gated so that the air won't get trapped in there. The air won't get trapped on this point, so there won't be a big air bubble. Maybe I could move that more to the point there. I'll come back and fix this up afterwards. Okay, this now it doesn't really matter. I'll just kind of, you know, throw out a little bit here and maybe gate that off up to there. I'm going to come through with a scalpel once this is actually done and maybe thicken up some of these lines and stuff like that. This discard, and what I want to do is I just want to maybe gate out the top of this hand here. See, I put in lots of gates, right? Lots of gates equal nice, clean kind of nice, clean shit. And shit, I've run out of wire, so I have to use this one. It's a little, oh no, it's the same fucking thickness. Right, so I'm just going to cut that out there. It's not an exact science. You just want to have a good guide. You're going to come back and you're going to fix your gates afterwards once it's all cast in silicone. So it doesn't matter. I can form it over this mound here and I can bend it down and the wire will stick in place like that. So that one, I feel, is more than sufficiently gated, right? So this one here, yeah, there's going to be a few problems, I reckon. I think this one is one that will be ideal for testing in the pressure pot. Maybe I'll just move the mold a bit and rotate the mold a little bit. From experience, I know that sharp points here, right, especially on thin areas, these are hard to fill, and even though the resin goes in there, sometimes the air just won't flow out. So I will always gate out sharp points, right? It stops that little tiny crappy kind of like you know, little tiny air bubble right at the very end. And in this case, I'm just going to gate it to this fin here because, you know, that'll sand off easily. It won't even be noticeable. Right, so I'll just gate this. I'll just join the tips of all of these up and just make sure I'm right on the tips there. And do I have enough for the gate there? It doesn't matter. I'll come back in and I will add a little cut in there in the silicone. Damn it, it's just a little too short there. Can I fill that with like a little piece? Maybe, yeah. Doesn't matter. Really, it doesn't matter. I don't even know why I just bothered doing that. Fuck's sakes. This here, right, when it flows down here, you would think that it's going to fill, right? But it's really thin. You know, like it's just really thin. You would think that, yeah, it's going to fill up and it's going to fill up from here. You don't. Nah. You're going to get air trapped in here. And because it's so thin, with a thin piece, you need to have lots of gates. I've heard people say, like, thin pieces are really hard. You know, you need to do injection molding and stuff like that. But you don't. You just need to gate them correctly. So I will put a gate in up here from the tip of this to allow the resin to flow down and go, hey, I want to escape up fucking here, man. I'm going to come up here. Yep, okay. Right. So I'll just gate that there. I'll push that in. Cool. So there's a gate there. Okay, where else? These fins here. Look, in theory, it should just run up here, and these are not in any danger. But I have, you know from experience that shit doesn't always happen. So I'm just going to put a gate in here. I'm going to put it to the top of this, and I can just, quickly just knock that off if I need to. Not quite. Probably there. Okay. So for me, when I'm casting and when I'm doing silicone, and when I'm preparing a mold and all that kind of stuff, I overgate. I'm an overgater, man. I'm an overgater. I just think that you just get cleaner molds, you get less air bubbles, and because I haven't had a pressure pot, I've had to learn a lot of techniques and a lot of different ways of, perfecting, not perfecting, because no fucking way is this perfect, but coming to somewhat a better level of understanding of mold creation so that I can eliminate all of those air bubbles. And the best way that I have found, and the best way after lots of research, and I read a couple of books, I had 2 really good books on how to make molds and all that kind of stuff, and I lent them to somebody, and they went to a different country and did not return my books, which were very important to me. But let's move along from that. Anyways, I have learnt that gating and learning how to do correct gating, oh man, especially on 3-4 piece molds, is your savior. You can, I've had a lot of people sit there and say, no, that's impossible to mold, that's impossible to make a mold out of. And I looked at it and I've gone, no, not at all. You can actually do that. You can do it, but you couldn't do it probably with 2-piece mold. But there's amazing things that you can do when you're combining 3, 4, 5-piece molds with really good gating. It's all about the flow of your liquid and, the dynamics of that. Damn. And I've just made that a little too fucking short. So let's remaneuver that. Okay, I don't want to have it too close to there. Alright, but let's just put that gate in there. Okay, so now when the resin comes in, it'll flow through these spikes, and hopefully the air bubbles will get pushed back out up through this gate. This here, I'm going to get an air bubble right there. I know it. It's going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen. So I think what I will do is I will just gate. I mean, I could gate from there to there. And I could do a gate from that point. You always look for the apex. Look for the very tip. Apex is probably right about there, right? Where it's coming down, and you know, because the air's going to gather there. When it fills up, and it fills up, and it fills up, air's going to gather there. So you want to make a nice clean path right out for the air to escape. And honestly, your first resin cast, when you first cast a piece in your silicone mold and you're doing complex pieces and you're doing like complex molding and stuff, it's a test cast, right? Because you're going to go back after that test cast and probably take your scalpel and, like, you know, I have my little decal scissors, and the decal scissors, I told you, they come in very handy because I can snip little tiny bits out of silicone with them, and I can fix gates and all that kind of stuff. So I do a lot of like adaptation and changes to my silicone mold after I've first done it. It doesn't remain the same, especially around the gates. Okay, to me, it's just about getting things so that when you're casting it, you have as little post effort in cleaning these things up, because that takes time, especially when you're doing batches of, like, you know, 30-40 toys or so. You know, your cleanup time to sand and fix everything, which you thought at the time was like, yeah, it's really not going to make that much difference. It's not going to take me a lot of time to do that. When you multiply that by 40 pieces and you have to do that, and you're doing it for a deadline, for a show or something like that, then it consumes time. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with these gates. I might come back in the morning and check them out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to key this. That's so that, you know, your molds don't slip and slide across the fucking place. I do big keys just with the back of a Sharpie, right? And these do not have to be exact either. I see people like being really careful with them and that. No, they don't have to be. So I just, you know, put a couple of big keys in around the corners, right? I don't like that. I don't like big keys near this. I don't want to press the plasticine back up into this. I put a couple of big keys in here and there, just here and there, right? And I'll do the same on this. I'm not going to be able to put a big key in here. I don't want to mess with any of that. But that's okay. We'll put a smaller key in. And I'm just using the backs of, like, the back of a Sharpie or the back of a brush. My silicone tip. Keys for a mold like this are a little more difficult. You just want to be a bit more careful. Doesn't matter if it's on an angle. It'll all lock into place because silicone is awesome. You don't need them deep or anything like that. That's fine. Like, it doesn't have to be deep. It just has to be like a registration so that it just doesn't slide out. See people gouging big deep holes or stuff like that. Doesn't matter what you do. You can put screws in here. You can do all that kind of stuff. You just need something that locks things in place. And then I'll kind of, you know, around as close as possible, I'll put a couple of little lock holes like this wherever I can. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, kind of got one in there, kind of got one in there, kind of there, kind of there. Boom, 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 boom. That's probably way too many, right? Okay, so I'm just going to come and do the same in here. It's good to kind of maybe do a couple of lock, like, you know, lock indents close around your piece. That way you know that it probably won't shift a hell of a lot. They don't have to be very deep. It's another, you know, fallacy. It just has to be enough that the silicone's going to grab onto itself and not move. And if you're using a good silicone, which honestly, if you're making toys, here's one other word of advice. Don't scrimp on your materials. Yeah, you can make toys out of all kinds of stuff, but if you're going to spend the time to do this, just buy nice materials to use. If you want to create something fucking beautiful, use beautiful materials, right? And you will find that those materials, they will treat you well as well. Anyways, so I'm pretty happy with this stuff right now. So I'm pretty happy with this. It's nice and clean. The molds are good. The lines are nice. The gates are pretty cool. I think it's all going to work. I might come back and just check it again in the morning when I come back to do this in the next spot. So what I will do next is I will actually do the silicone casting, and I'll show you through that process as well. Okay then, I'm gonna do some casting. I got my trusty gloves on. Woo, yeah. I got my two pieces here. I have my silicone. So this is a pinky sil from Barnes. It's not usually what I use. I usually use the solid solutions, but I've got this. First things first, how much fucking silicone do I need for these? The best way I found of doing it, and man, this is a really, really rough way of doing it, okay? I actually measure this out, right? So that's 14 centimeters, and I just got a piece of paper down here, 14 by 12, and it's roughly about maybe about 3.5. Okay, so the thing with this is that, as you can see here, when I'm measuring this one up, okay, it's a bit uneven. So this volume here is going to fill the volume of what you just measured, right? Okay, so that's the first one. So the second one is roughly, let's say, and you know what, this is an approximation. I'll usually maybe go a bit over. So this one's 8.5 by, I mean, I've been doing this for quite a long time, and this has usually kind of worked pretty well for me. 14.5. And the depth is roughly, let's just say around about there, maybe 4.5, 550. Now I can probably get away with this one with maybe about a 550, and this one would probably be maybe about 500. So I'm just going to mix up 500 on each, maybe about a litre of this, 1 litre, okay, which will be 1,000 grams of silicone. So yeah, it might be a bit under, but this one I don't need to fill all the way up to the top of the line. I think that there's enough clearance here that I can have a fairly thin mold, as long as it's covering it up to a certain amount here. This one, maybe. But I'm going to try to conserve silicone because I want to try to get both of these pieces cast with the silicone that I have. And I'm going to have to order some more fucking silicone to do the other molds that I have. So let's give that a go and see how it works. So we'll do the first one first. Okay, and I'm just going to do this with the trusty. So if I do the first one and I find that I don't have enough silicone, I'll mix more with the second batch instead of, or I'll usually have another toy in case I have too much. Too little is okay, I can usually fix that, but too much, yeah, it kind of sucks. Cool, I got these. These are just wide angle thumb depressors, you know. So let's just measure these out, And I'll put this one in first, and I'll do 250 of this. I don't know, I'm hoping that you can see this here, but let's just put it up on there. Okay, I'll do 250 of this one. The outside of this vessel is very dirty, but the inside of it is absolutely clean. Yeah, that's about right. Oh, and I just dropped some unmixed silicone there. That was the problem with doing this. So I'm just going to measure this off over here. So this silicone actually sets pretty quickly, man. So I got to work really quickly to do this one. So I'll just take you through what I'm actually going to do. I'll mix this one in. I will then mix it up. I'll scrape it all from the sides and scrape it and scrape it and scrape it. And then what I do is I pour from really high. Okay? When I'm pouring my silicone, if I want to maybe reduce the amount of air bubbles and stuff in this, I do a really, really high pour. Okay? As high as I can get. And I'll try to do that with the camera while I'm doing it so that you can actually see. And I'll always aim for a spot in the corner. What you don't want to do with your silicone when you're pouring it is pour it directly onto the toy. You also don't want to just pour it over in random spots, okay? You want to pour it in one corner and let it roll over your piece really slowly. Because as it rolls over your piece, it's going to push any of the air bubbles and it's going to break air bubbles on the leading edge, kind of like a wave, right? Okay, so all the air bubbles will break. I've just spotted a small hole down in here that I'm going to really, really quickly fix because I don't want to lose the silicone. And I think that that might be a gap underneath the toy where potentially my silicone could actually find its way down and I'll lose silicone underneath it. I don't want to waste too much silicone. Okay, so I'm going to mix this, okay, with the pink, this one, and then I'm going to mix it up, and then I'm going to pour it from really high. See, my estimates might be totally out, and this might be way too much silicone. I really hope not, but yeah. I try to go under a lot of the time rather than over, but what I could do is I could weigh it and then reduce it. So I'm just going to mix this. I'm going to try not to, it doesn't really matter. The reason for the high pour, okay, and why I pour really, really high is because the actual air bubbles will break as they go down. So I'm just checking the bottom. Checking the bottom, making sure that it's all mixed nicely. Okay. Scraping the sides, scraping the bottom. Working pretty quickly. I'm not worried about air bubbles at the moment, okay? Because the trick is to pour from high. Okay, that's good. Alright, so I'm going to pick a spot here. Okay, probably in the corner here. And I'm going to go high. See how small the stream is? Okay, and see how high I'm pouring from? The reason I'm doing this is because as it comes over the lip and as it streams down, a lot of the air bubbles will break. Okay. The other air bubbles, oh god, I hope I mix this properly. The other air bubbles will break along the lip of this. Right, notice I'm not pouring on the toy here. I'm pouring from extremely high. Okay, so this one is set pretty quickly. So I'm going to pull this one out. My measurement said 550. I'm going to go for maybe 400, 450. I'll go for 450. The front of this will use a lot of silicone because it's pretty raised up. The back I won't need a lot at all, so I'm just going to measure that out. So probably 450. So I do like really thick kind of molds. I find that they hold together and they last a lot longer. When you're casting resin, the resin gets really hot, right? And if you have smaller silicon molds, the heat doesn't disperse as much as if you have, say, a larger mold, right? So the heat is what kills your molds. That and ripping it out, ripping pieces out and stuff like that. So I'm just mixing it up. Okay, scrape the edges here. Try to scrape the bottom a bit and make sure I've got everything off there. You want to get it a nice even color without any white swirls on it. See, there's a little white swirl there. So make sure you get all of that out. But with this one, you got to work a bit quicker. The advantage is that your mold's ready quicker. The disadvantage is that you have to be fucking quick. And sometimes that can lead to problems. So I'm just tapping it a bit. Nah. Okay. I think that should be good enough. Just going to tap it a bit. Get some of those air balls down. And once again, I'm going to pick a corner. Yeah, it's too much silicone. I can already tell, right? And pick a corner. And see how... Oh, damn. Got it. There was a bit of shit that just landed in there. Oh. See how the stream is kind of breaking sometimes as it's going down on? That means it's getting rid of the air bubbles. Wherever the break is in the stream was a big air bubble in the silicone. Yeah. You can kind of see, right? And I'm not directly pouring on the piece. You see a little break in the stream every so often. That is the air bubbles breaking. This is why you do a really tall, high pour. And yes, your hand will hurt, so I'm going to swap hands at the moment. Or at least use my other hand to support it. Right, and it's nicely rolling over that piece. Rolling, 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 rolling. Not too fast. If you go too fast, it won't break air bubbles and it won't get rid of the air bubbles. Your air bubbles will just get stuck there against your piece. If you go too slow, if you have a fast set silicone like this, it might set before you finish such a large mold. These are fairly large pieces. Actually, maybe... No, I still think I've used too much silicone. Now, once it's over the piece, then you can move your silicone around a little bit. It doesn't have to stay in the corner. But I generally wait until the silicone is covering my entire piece. I'm just bringing this down a little bit. Checking for any swirls in the silicone to make sure it's all mixed properly. And yeah, it's fine. Oh. Not too fast. Just take it nice and slow. Don't be in a rush to cover your piece with silicone. The quicker you go, the more risk of air bubbles you have. And if you're not actually putting this in a vacuum chamber, which is what you do to remove all of your air bubbles, vacuum chamber for silicone, pressure pot for resin. I don't generally use a pressure pot or a vacuum chamber. I try to mold things so that there's an air bubble there, and oh, that was bad. Doesn't matter. It was better than having an air bubble on there. Don't do that. Okay, it's about to cover the whole piece. Now, I think I have to go all the way up to the top here, and I should have enough silicone for it, purely because that piece has only just been covered, which means that the wall of the silicone between it and the top of the mold will be very thin. I don't really like that. And I have a feeling, so I'm just going to stop this for a second here. Cool. Yeah, I think that was just enough. Perfect. Alright, so maybe my estimations aren't that bad. Now, you see, this is why I wear gloves. Like, the silicone will just peel off your fingers and shit, but to be honest with you, if it's uncured silicone, man, that stuff is sticky and goes all over the place. So I'm just going to let that set, and I'll come back tomorrow because I'm going to go to bed, and I'll come back tomorrow and I'll pour the other side, and I'll leave a note for myself to spray mold release on here because I have forgotten before because I'm a forgetful bastard. I do this sometimes. Alright, so this is just in case. You see the air bubbles rising up. I try to tap it a bit, but the more I tap it, like, you know, the more risk I have of silicone and doing things, stupid things like that. But I do want to get some of those air bubbles out. Yeah. Okay. And that's that side. So next I'll come and flip it over and I'll show you what I do and how I pull the other side. Cool. Sweet. Okay, so it's the next day, and as you can see, I mean, it was pretty well set within an hour and a bit after I poured it and cast it. I just got back to it now because I spent the day setting up a 3D printer, which I'll go into at another stage once I've learnt how to fucking use it. So this side is all done. Now you'll see here on my hand I've written release because I always fucking forget, and sometimes I forget the release. So that's my reminder today to spray release. And this is the spray release that I'm using today. Doesn't matter what you use. I usually use a good spray release. Some people use talcum powder in that. I find talcum powder and stuff and things like Vaseline and all that kind of thing, at least so much residue, the talcum powder can leave weird patterns and stuff. So now that this is set, I'm going to pull this apart. Well, I'm not really. I'm just going to flip it. So I'm just going to pull it off the Lego plate. And I'm going to see how much I fucked up. Because I have a feeling that a lot of silicone slipped through the cracks. Ah, man. See, silicone will find cracks, man. Oh, damn, that's a lot of silicone. That's a huge waste, to be really honest with you. So that's why the level on that one dipped down. I mustn't have sealed it properly somewhere. And it's all kind of found the gaps. Silicone will always find a way. So that is actually a big bad waste of silicone, which I could have used for something else. But the good thing is that I can chop this up and mill it up, and I can use it again. Don't throw away any of your wasted silicone. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm just going to pull some of these bricks off. Not too many, okay, because I don't want to have to rebuild this whole freaking thing all over again. And if you don't have enough Lego bricks, I'm going to show you my trick for doing this. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Right, so this one didn't leak at all. This one, man, seems to have leaked a fair bit, which is not cool. I must not have gotten all of the gaps. And I mean, I'll find those gaps when I flip it over again. Alright, so what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to really carefully peel all of this, all of the plasticine away from the mold. Right. And it's nice and hard, so it should come off quite easily. I'll just try to find an edge and try to peel it. What you don't want to do, and this is the #1 thing, okay? And I see a lot of people doing this, and I don't know why, because it's going to take them forever to clean things up, and they're going to get horrible flashing. You don't want to pull your masterpiece out of the silicone that it has already been in. Okay, so I'm just pulling this back really carefully. It's nice and hard, so it's not a big problem. Okay, there's silicone that's fallen through there. That sucks. It just means that there's going to be more of a cleanup than I had initially hoped to have to do. To be very honest with you, I was rushing through these in order to demonstrate how I do the process. Honestly, I would usually spend a lot more time on making these molds. For me, making the mold is probably one of the most important parts of the process, because that's what you're going to get. All of your pieces are going to come from this thing, and you want to get it as nice as you possibly can. So I'm just trying to pull this out without breaking it too much, because when you break it, it takes a bit longer to clean out the mold. Okay, it's just... Damn it, and it broke off there. There's a piece there. Let's get this out. Yeah, so you'll see here, it's definitely come out off the mold, but I will clean this up. Unfortunately, it might be that this mold will have... It won't be one of my most perfect ones, unfortunately. And unless I can clean it up and get rid of some of that excess silicone, I might have some flash lines and stuff on this that I'll have to clean up in post. So the plasticine actually generally comes off of the silicone really quite nicely. This bit's going to be a little difficult, so just get one of my tools here. No, so I don't want that to happen. I want to be able to pull this out in a chunk, but it's not really cooperating with me. Let's do this one first then. Okay, yep, that one came out fine. Because what happens if you can't pull it out all in one chunk, you're going to have to go back and clean up all the little bits of plasticine that are left behind, like all of that stuff. Okay. Got it. That's pretty clean. Some plasticine down there. So there's some overhang silicone here that I'm going to have to probably take off with my scalpel. There's plasticine down in the hands here. This all has to go. Alright. So all this stuff I have to come through and clean out all these little bits. Now this is the other thing about this plasticine being a bit older, right? Because this plasticine's a little older, unfortunately it doesn't stay together as well as it used to. Might be time to buy some new plasticine, considering I've had this stuff for a very long time. So I'm going to have to come through and clean all this out and dig it all out. You can see now where my gates are. Okay, and they're in the silicone. I don't want to move anything, right? Don't want to move anything from this at all. I'll come up and I'll clean out all the little bits. But you can see anyways how kind of clean this has come off, how kind of clean the plasticine has come off. Things like clay and stuff like that, honestly, it doesn't come off as clean as plasticine. Plasticine's really, really quite nice. And you can see, where you see this coming out here, right? This is where I've missed a gap in the plasticine from being careless, okay? Now, the problem with this stuff here is that it will increase your flashing on the edges, right? So you'll see some here. I've got to come through and clean and remove all of that and make sure that it's not there. As I said, this was a rush job, so it's okay. I'll spend some time going through and fixing it up. It's usually very, very easy to fix, right? It comes off very easily. So I'll just pull this other one off, and I'm a bit more worried about this one, to be honest with you. Given the fact that, you know, there was so much silicone that came out of this damn thing. And I am running very low on silicone at the moment. So I'm just going to try to get a good... I don't want to disassemble this too much, because disassembling it too much, you got to build it back up, because you've got to build the walls back up to do the second piece. But it looks like it's going to come off quite cleanly and okay. I'm actually really curious to see where I missed on this and where the silicone came through. And it was around, you know what, it was at the base. Oh, yeah. Wow. Now this is what I would call a bad mold, a bad setup. It's a really bad setup. You know what's happened here? I haven't blocked the silicone in underneath here. I've missed it. And it's come in underneath the piece. Fortunately, it hasn't touched the silicone on the other side of the mold, so it should be okay. But this is a bit of a disaster. I should have blocked off the bottom of this piece here. The rest of it, if I hadn't have made that mistake, the rest of it is really clean, right? Like you can see, I've pulled out a gate here. I'll come back and I'll put that back in. The gates don't really matter, but the rest of it, the rest of the mold is really nice and clean. There's a little bit of a gap there. There's a bit here. So I'm just going to go and get my scalpel and I'm going to actually cut this off here. I came through and cleaned all of this up. I got rid of all the little bits of silicone that were around the sides. This one I didn't have to do a lot of cleaning of. This one I had to do a bit of cleaning. So the problem that you saw before that I had was that the silicone leaked out through here. I hadn't sealed underneath this. Now, it's good to show these mistakes because this is how much silicone I fucking wasted. Alright? Because I didn't seal it properly. I was rushing, I wasn't paying attention. And yeah, usually I'd spend a lot more time on these molds, but for these ones I just wanted to do the illustration. I ended up paying the price of lost silicone. So I've kind of plugged this down now. It's fine. So I'm just going to rebuild these back up. But before I do that, I'm going to spray my mold release on now. Because there's sections under here and under here that I want the mold release to go on, I need to kind of spray it on now and get it down into some of these little gaps, right? So I try not to go, this is the mold release that I'm using. I try to be careful, but I inevitably end up putting too much of this on because I'm really panicky about silicone sticking. But really, in actual fact, you don't need a lot. So I'm just going to come in under the gaps here. Now, if you put too much on, and it's on these pieces, don't worry about that for now. Just get the gaps, and mostly get the bits between. I've probably gone way overboard and put on way too much than I actually need, but it's alright. Now, if I was to actually cast the silicone on this now, right, all this would end up having a really rough surface because there's too much mold release on there. So I just come in and I wipe it off. And just wipe the mold release off of the actual piece. Don't wipe it off the silicone, But okay, so I built the Lego back up from the pieces that I took off from underneath, right? Because you can just kind of keep it there on the base of the silicone. If you don't have enough Lego pieces, just take it from underneath and build it back up. So I built it back up. I've checked to make sure I've got enough clearance here, enough clearance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get away with 400 and 400. I don't know if that's going to actually like be enough, but I'm going to give it a go and see what happens. So I'm just reusing my sticks here because it's just silicone and it just pulls off. And silicone from this will just pull out. Yeah, it's like a big fucking condom, man. Okay, I think that will do. Okay, just keep that there. And once again, I'm going to pour from one corner. See, there's quite a few air bubbles, so it's all good. And I'm just going to find a corner really slowly, and then high pour. High pour. Really high pour, not too fast. Let it roll over your piece, let it get into all those little gaps, get rid of all that air. Okay, so it's half an hour later. This one is already solid, so I'm going to mix up another 400. So 400, I'm hoping 400 is enough here. If not, I've got a trick. So I'm just going to pour this one in. Okay. Let's just make sure I've got the edges. Get that bottom bit. So I've already sprayed these, so it's okay. Yes, there's mold release on it. Okay. And I think that'll be enough for that. So these are big molds, right? So I'm just gonna find a little bit. Okay. Yeah, they're big molds. They're not small pieces. Oh shit, what is that? Okay, got it. Alright, let's go. Let's try this again. So very, very, very high pour. Just let it wash over. Do it slow, let it wash. All those little air bubbles hopefully break on the edge there. You can see, again, I'm doing a really high pour. Sometimes your hand can hurt. But, you know. Look, you can use cardboard for your molds if you really want, and cut them out so you're not using as much silicone and all that. I just like a nice square mold because when I'm casting, I'll use wood blocks to hold them nice and tight. You can actually see quite a lot of air bubbles in this, so I forgot to tap this one before. Should be okay, but you know. I can go a bit faster now. Oops, that was a bit too fast. I think I probably could have gotten away with doing like 350 maybe? No, but then it would have been too shallow up around here. I am going to have to buy more silicone. No, actually, you know what? I think this might just be enough. I'm a bit worried here. It's a little shallow. It's only just covering it, really. I'm not really sure if 400 was quite enough. It should be okay. I mean, this silicone, it's fairly rigid. I'm a little worried about how shallow it is, though. Here's some of the silicone I had before. What I want to do is just maybe throw some in here. I know that there's nothing in here, in this section, but what I actually just want to do is give it a little bulk. Like, this will displace the liquid. It counts as silicone. I'm just a bit worried because it's quite thin on the top here now. What you don't want to do is put these pieces in on top of your piece or anything like that, because that'll screw it. And you know what? I think I'm just going to pull this out and not do it. If it's thin, it's thin. Hopefully it'll be thick enough that it'll still mold okay. I wanted to come up to this line here, to be honest. But it is what it is. I don't think it's very far down in there. Hopefully, like, the problem with that is that if your mold is thin near one of the pieces, it could deform because it's so thin, but we'll just have to see. What I could do is just mix up a little bit more silicone and put it on the top here. I don't really have any left. If I had have ground all this up, like cut it up real fine in a grinder and stuff, I would have sprinkled it all on top and it would have, like, you know, been okay. But it's not prepared yet. So that's it. That's both the molds done. See how this one turns out. Okay, so there you have it. It's all pretty well set. So this is actually the really fun part. Yeah, I get to pull apart all the fucking Lego, and find out if I fucked up the mold or if I got a good mold. I don't know. So I'm just gonna start pulling it apart because I don't need this shit no more. Sometimes I'll go through and clean up my Lego of any extra silicone and shit. Just makes it really easy to tear down. Sometimes I'll break it. It's funny because I just finished watching the season finale of Lego Masters tonight, and that shit is dope. I have not seen the American Lego Masters yet, but the Australian one is fucking awesome. And I do love Lego. I just wish I had more time to actually play Lego rather than just using it for molds, but I sit here and play in my studio, making my own toys. So it's a bit of a process. It's alright, you can break it. It's fine. Ah! It's kind of fun. I mean, isn't half the fun of Lego breaking it? And building something new? In my case, I'm probably just going to build more molds, but hey, what the fuck? Okay. Now, remember, I was really worried about this one being too thin. Yeah, so I'm not really sure. So, you can see here, so that's the... that's probably about how thick that one is, and that's how thin that one is there. Yeah, it's going to be quite thin. I can kind of... oh, yeah, I can feel it in there. This is a thinner mold than I would usually make, because the problem being, I could have come and poured more silicone on top of this, but the problem is that if the silicone rips or anything like that, or it should be alright, but it might not last as many molds as I thought. But I ran out of silicone and I don't have any more, so there's not a hell of a lot that I can do about it at the moment. So, fuck it, I'll just open it up. If I sprayed this correctly, and if I did it well, the mold should open up really nicely. I might have to take my scalpel and cut away some of it. You can see this is where the base is. So usually what I'll do is I'll just start to kind of like, right, there you go, and just rip it away a little bit. I try to find the seam line, wherever the hell that would be. And hopefully sometimes it just kind of pops out at you and you find the seam line really, really easily. Other times you're going to struggle with your mold, especially with the larger molds, like this one. But I just generally kind of work away. And this one doesn't look like it's going to pop nicely. So, let's just have a look here. Okay, there's the piece. There's the piece. And the mold. So, I might not have gotten mold release down on the edges. I do try to spray down a little bit. So, I'll just kind of nip it a little bit and see if that comes out. The initial pull on these larger molds sometimes takes a little extra time. I do like to be a bit careful. And if I find that it's not unsealing from the top very well, then I'll go and try it from the side somewhere. So I can pull this apart. So a scalpel is going to be really handy when you're doing this, because you're going to be looking at your gates and fixing them up. Your first pour, your first resin pour, will probably be like just a test pour, just to see how it works. So this is not coming apart as well as I had hoped. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a seam line around here somewhere and see if I can open it up from the side. I generally do take my time on this. What I don't want to do is I don't want to break the piece inside at all. And I probably could have sprayed up in these corners a bit better, but I didn't. I sprayed all on the silicone, but I didn't spray up in the corners. sometimes it just takes a bit of push and pull to try to unlock your piece a bit to help it release on the edges. I always forget to spray down on the inside of the edges of the Lego, which is something that you should probably do. And now it's just going to pop out now. Ow, what was that? That was a piece of metal from a gate. Okay, so I forgot these edges, so I'm just popping it. Pop. Pop. There we go. It's always quite a satisfying thing opening up a mold for the first time. I love it. I just want to be careful up there because I just noticed that there's a bit there that's, and I'll just get down there and I don't want to tear it. I want to cut it so it's nice and clean. See how it's really close, really close to the edge there. Not my most ideal mold in the world. I don't think I really gave this one enough clearance. It should cast okay, but I run the risk of resin pouring out of here if I don't. Yeah, see, it's very close to the edge there. I would usually have made a bit more clearance, but as I said, you know, I was in a bit of a rush with these. Take your time. There's no rush. This is the most important part because, you know, this is what all of your toys are going to be made of. Right? So I'm just going to pull. There's a gate there. Okay. Don't want to break your master either. So at some stage you see if we can just... No, not quite yet. And just peel this back. There we go. Okay. Alright. There we go. What is that? Okay, first initial look at this. Gates are okay. Piece is still intact. Nice. So this guy's going to have some... I'm actually going to build another piece and have teeth running along here, but I couldn't mold them because it would have got stuck, so it'll have a secondary piece. So see how in here the gate there's silicone over it? That's okay because we're just going to cut. We're probably going to come and make a bit of a edit on some of these gates anyways. This is my mold cleanup, right? So I'll do things like just open up bits here, open up wherever the gates are so that they flow through properly. Let's just... Yeah. So parts that I'm wary of is just down here. It's very close to the edge here. And the fact that this is really thin here. It should be fine, but yeah, I'll have to, when I'm casting, probably use some mold release and stuff like that. I worry how thin that is, and if that gets damaged or ripped. Yeah, I mean, there's things I can do, but I'm not sure how long this will last once it's in that state. So what I usually do, and I'll open up the other mold in a second, but see how the gates aren't quite touching? So a lot of the time I'll just come in and I'll kind of like just making sure like nick a little hole in there so that the air can come out. And just pull out the silicone. silicone always wants to stay. Right. So you can see there's a little air nick there now. So that'll make sure that it comes up through the gate. And if I see bits like this, I'll just kind of cut them out a bit, just to open up the gate. And maybe a bit of a nick there. So yeah, I'll just come through and I'll do a little cleanup like this. I'll open up some gates. I'll just make little nicks right where the gates and that should be, just to ensure that, you know, the air's actually flowing through. When I do my first test cast, I'll see where all the air is flowing through properly and that, and then I'll come back and I'll actually adjust the mold. So your mold is not totally sacrosanct, you know, it's not. You can come back and you can actually edit your mold and fix up these gates. Like, sometimes things have been bad and I've cut a whole new gate directly into the mold. Don't be too precious about this. Oh, the thinness of this is really worrying me, but it'll be okay. Alright, so look, all in all, see, that's quite nice and thick. It should be okay. When I get some more silicone at some stage, I might actually just pour some more on top of that and do it. But I'm probably only going to make probably about 20 of these pieces, so it should be okay. I reckon it should last up until 20. Alright, so I'm going to pull the other mold now. And same kind of process. Do you like my shirt? You can't see it. Oh, wait. It's sushi. It's from a Japanese artist called Kasushi, I think. Yeah, Kasushi. Her shit's rad. Okay, so I'm gonna open this one up now and see how this went. Yeah. So this mold's definitely nice thickness. Had those arms extended out, remember? Cool. So this is the base. Right, I was wondering where I put my thing. So I can see the feet here, so I'm just gonna kind of cut off some of that. Cool. So I need to find the tip point. Doesn't matter what side you get it from. I always look for the plasticine line when I'm going to make a cut to try to open it from a side or something. I just look for the little line of plasticine and then try to open it from there. But, you know, doesn't always work. Yeah, so this is my eternal problem here. Like, I always forget to spray up on the sides. I always get it on the face, on the inside of the mold, but my problem is that I forget the sides, and that's where you're actually opening it from. So don't do what I did, And when you're making your mold, actually get up into the sides. Oh, that's not good. That plasticine got stuck down there, so his toes are going to be a bit deformed now. And it's going to take a bit of work to actually clean up. Ah, oh, bugger. The plasticine shouldn't have been there. It's alright. We'll fix that later. I'm just trying to get a bit of a tear. Now, where is that mold line? Ah. There it is. Ah, gotcha. Okie dokie. Sometimes it just takes a bit of force. Not too much force. I wedge my fingers in there just to hold it tight, just so I can gradually open it up a bit. There it goes. Just those edges get caught a little bit. Right. Nice separation. I can feel that this is a nice mold. Just using the razor blade just on those edges where I missed. Just to put not too much stress on the actual mold itself. And pop. There we go. It looks good. Looks very good. And I'll just cool. So this will be the thing when I'm actually popping him out of the mold, right? So the way I had to do it was his legs are a little in. I wonder what that is there. There's a little like, oh, I hope that wasn't an air hole, an air bubble. I hope that's actually in the mold. There might be a for the very first time. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it's just the way the mold is at the moment and with him in there. So when I cast him, I'll have to be pulling him out like that. So that'll wear on the mold a bit. Okay. Worried a bit about that, but there you go, the master. He goes over there. And now I'll just kind of like pull out the gates. There's that problem with that foot. So the gate hasn't really opened up properly, so I'll just kind of cut a bit. There's another gate there. It's important that you actually like let the routes of your gates get to where they're intended to be. So I just do a V cut on one side and then cut in on another side. And there's another bit. I want to cut that out there so that it can actually, the air can actually escape. And this one here, just cut a bit of a V out there so that air can escape. And then I'll just come through and I'll make sure that all these bits like this are all cut out. Anywhere where the air is going to flow out, just make sure that there's a route for the air to actually flow out. So I'm being very careful here just to do a really, really small bit. Resin will always find a way to flow, so you don't need big cuts. So I'm not sure how this one's going to work. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to do a V cut around here. This is all just cleaning up your molds and making sure that your gates and your air vents and that are nicely, that they actually allow the passage of air. Silicone's actually a bit of a bitch to cut sometimes, so you know, persevere. This look clean, there's a little bit there. I think that's where I was joining something. I'll have to come in and I'll have to really check on these hand bits here, like, but also be very careful and just make it a very, very small cut to the gate. Not like what I just did, which was a big cut by accident. Oops. Yep, that should be fine. Air will be able to get through there. That bit there, just on the thumb, really, really small cut. And this is where also my decal scissors that I was talking about in my tools thing comes in handy. I can just snip a really small piece off there, right? Or I can just snip. See how that gate there is not joined to this other gate, so I just snip and then snip and then I pull down. You're going to find all these flaws when you do your first test cast. The first cast that you do with a mold where you're doing gating and stuff like that, it's just a test cast. Like, you'll find out all the parts that don't flow through properly. You'll find out where all the air bubbles are. You'll find out where you need to cut into your mold in order to make it better. You know, when you're doing complex gating and stuff like this, you just got to not stick entirely to what you have at the beginning. So see that? That's not going down to the bottom there. Yeah, there. So anyways, that's 2 pieces molded. Quite nice mold. I'm okay with it, except for this one here. It's a bit thin, a bit worried about it, but it should be okay, right? There you go. They're my 2-piece molds. Okay, cool. So that's my process for making 2-piece molds. It's a bit more in depth than most of the other 5-minute ones, but you're kind of used to me doing longer tutorials now. I hope that there was some things in there that you got from me that can add to all the other stuff that you've probably watched and seen other people do. A couple of my tricks: make sure you spray in the corners of your Lego. Use wire, armature wire, and stuff for gating. Always spray. Make sure that you don't lock in your mold. The Lego thing is really cool. So I hope that you got something out of this, and I hope you enjoyed my process, and I hope that you would love to subscribe to my channel, because I do have a lot more stuff to come. I always have more stuff to come. I'm trying to update this kind of semi-regularly, and it would be great if you followed me along over the next however fucking long this is gonna take. I do not know. But I got a lot of really other cool things coming up, and as I find new things, I'll share them, and as I share new things, hopefully people will be able to tell me new things, and we'll just have a big like toy fucking like orgy of awesome knowledge shit. Cool. Oh, and also, I'd love it if you checked out my website, irikanji.com. All of my toys have this massive backstory that I've been creating for like 25 years now. It goes across all of my art, all my street art, all of my toys. Each toy has a unique story. There's a whole universe. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But I'd just love for people to kind of get to know a bit more about the whole narrative and everything behind my work. It's not just individual unique pieces. They all have a place in this universe. And I love my toys. And yeah, they all have their unique kind of place in the universe. And I think that creating a story behind your toys is another really, really important thing. Something that I'll go into at another later stage. But create a narrative to your stories. Like, you have a world in your head, and you should share that world and share that narrative with everybody else that loves it. I always find that, you know, I could see a really bland toy, well, in visually in my eyes, but if it has an awesome backstory and it has an awesome like world and narrative to it, I'll be like, damn, that's one of the best fucking toys I've ever seen. You don't have to be the most technically expert toy maker. You don't have to, you know, use the best resins. You don't have to like, it doesn't have to have the best finish. It doesn't have to be sanded. But if you've got a great fucking story and a great fucking narrative to your piece, or the packaging tells a story, or, you know, just you got something cool about it, some essence to it, that can help it make a great fucking toy. Anyways, cheers guys. Thanks a lot. Oh shit, I forgot. One of the other most important things that you need when you're making toys is some fucking wine. Some fucking wine, but I fucking drank it all. And now there's no wine. But that's okay. I already made the molds. Fuck it. I'll just go get more. Bye.